He thought he bought a trophy wife. He didn't know he married a warrior. The Duke of Stirling, Sebastian Caldwell, believed his marriage was a simple business transaction, his title for her father's iron mines. For 3 years, they hadn't shared a bed, a laugh, or a secret. He saw her as a pampered, shallow doll until the night he walked into her chambers unannounced. He didn't just catch her undressing. He caught a glimpse of a history written in blood across her skin. What Sebastian saw that night shattered his pride and revealed a dangerous secret that could destroy the entire British peerage. This is the story of how a frozen heart learned to burn. The silence in the dining hall of Blackwood Manor was louder than a cannon blast. It was a silence curated over 3 years of a marriage that existed only on paper. Sebastian Caldwell, the 9th Duke of Stirling, sat at the head of the mahogany table. The candlelight flickered off his sharp jawline and the silver signet ring on his finger. He was a man carved from granite and regret a war hero from the siege of Varna who had returned home to find his family estate drowning in debt. To save the tenants who relied on him, he had done the only thing a gentleman could do. He sold himself. At the other end of the table sat Genevieve. She was breathtaking, undeniably. Her hair was the color of spun gold, her eyes a piercing sapphire blue that always seemed to be looking past him, never at him. She wore a gown of pale blue silk that cost more than a farmer's cottage, her neck draped in the Caldwell sapphires. To the outside world, to the gossip columns of the London Gazette, they were the golden couple. To Sebastian, she was a stranger, a very expensive stranger. "The mutton is excellent tonight," Genevieve said softly. Her voice was melodic, practiced. The voice of a woman taught to speak only when necessary and to say nothing of substance. Sebastian didn't look up from his plate. "Cook has outdone herself. I will inform her. I have a fitting for the winter solstice ball tomorrow," she continued, her tone light. "Madame Leclerc says velvet is the trend this season." Sebastian's grip on his fork tightened. Velvet, balls, trends. This was the extent of her world. While he spent his days arguing with the House of Lords about grain tariffs and inspecting the crumbling retaining walls of the tenant farms, she worried about fabric. "Spend what you must," Sebastian said, his voice cold. "That is what you are good at, is it not?" The insult hung in the air. For a second, Genevieve's hand paused over her wineglass. A flash of something pain, anger, flickered in her eyes, but it was gone so quickly Sebastian assumed he imagined it. She merely smiled, that perfect, porcelain smile that never reached her eyes. "As you say, Your Grace." She stood up, the silk rustling like a whisper. "If you will excuse me, I have a headache. I shall retire early." "Go." He dismissed her. He watched her leave, her posture rigid, her head held high. He hated himself for the insult, but he hated the distance between them more. He had tried. In the beginning, he had tried to find the woman beneath the heavy layers of etiquette and wealth, but she was a fortress of pleasantries. She never complained, she never cried, she never argued. She was perfect, and she was utterly hollow. Or so he thought. Later that night, the manor was plunged into darkness, save for the storm brewing outside. Rain lashed against the stone walls of Stirling Hall. Sebastian sat in his study, a glass of brandy untouched on his desk. He was looking at the ledger again. Even with Genevieve's dowry, the massive influx of cash from her father, the iron magnate Lord Silas Harrington, the estate was bleeding money. Someone was siphoning funds from the charitable accounts. He had been tracking the discrepancy for weeks, and tonight he found a receipt that didn't make sense. A massive payment made to a private sanitarium in the Swiss Alps, authorized by a signature that looked like a forgery of his own. He needed to check the household checkbook, which was kept in the safe in the master suite. Technically, the master suite belonged to both of them. In reality, Genevieve occupied the main bedroom, and Sebastian slept in the adjoining dressing room on the rare occasions he wasn't in the guest wing. He hadn't stepped foot in her private sanctuary in 6 months. He checked his pocket watch. Midnight. She would be asleep. He wouldn't wake her. He would simply slip in, open the wall safe behind the portrait of his grandfather, check the ledger, and leave. He needed to know if his wife was spending his money on more than just velvet. Sebastian walked through the silent corridors, the floorboards groaning under his heavy boots. He reached the double doors of her room. He didn't knock. It was his house, after all, and he expected her to be unconscious. He turned the brass handle and pushed the door open. The room was not dark. The fire in the hearth was roaring, casting long, dancing shadows against the floral wallpaper, and Genevieve was not asleep. She was standing in the center of the room, facing the fire, her back to the door. Sebastian froze. She had evidently just dismissed her maid. Her blue silk gown lay in a pool on the floor. She was wearing only her chemise, a thin, white cotton slip that ended at her knees. Genevieve, Sebastian started to speak, to apologize for the intrusion, but then she moved. She reached up and unlaced the back of the chemise, letting it slide down her shoulders to her waist. The words died in Sebastian's throat. The brandy glass would have shattered if he had been holding it. His breath hitched, a sharp, painful sound in the quiet room. He had expected smooth, pale skin, the skin of a woman who had never known a day of labor, never known a moment of danger, a pampered princess. Instead, what he saw made his military stomach churn. Her back was a canvas of violence. Running diagonally from her right shoulder down to her left hip were 3 thick, jagged scars. The flesh was raised, white and puckered, the undeniable signature of a whip or a heavy lash. They were old scars, but deep wounds that should have killed her. But that wasn't all. Near her ribs, there was a circular burn mark, branded into the skin, and across her lower back, a constellation of smaller, fading bruises that looked suspiciously fresh. Sebastian felt the room spin. This was his wife? The woman who worried about velvet? The woman who couldn't bear to walk in the rain? She looked like a soldier who had survived a torture chamber. Genevieve must have sensed the draft from the open door, or perhaps she felt his gaze burning into her. She turned around slowly, clutching the chemise to her chest to cover her front. When she saw him, her face drained of all color. The mask of the porcelain duchess shattered instantly. Her eyes went wide with a primal, terrified panic. "Sebastian," she whispered, her voice trembling in a way he had never heard before. She didn't scream. She didn't try to cover her back. She simply stared at him, trapped. Sebastian stepped into the room and kicked the door shut behind him. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Who did that to you?" His voice was a low growl, vibrating with a rage he didn't understand. Genevieve took a step back, nearly tripping over her discarded gown. "Get out. Please, Sebastian. Get out." 3 years, Sebastian said, walking toward her. He didn't see a stranger anymore. He saw a mystery, a horrifying, bloody mystery. 3 years I have lived with you. I thought you were made of glass. But glass doesn't scar like that. He stopped 3 feet from her. The firelight illuminated the terror in her eyes. "Who marked you, Genevieve? Was it your father?" "Don't speak of him," she hissed. The fear was suddenly replaced by a flash of steel. "You have no right to be here." "I am your husband," Sebastian roared, losing his composure. "I have every right. You are covered in scars that would make a dragoon faint. You play the part of a mindless socialite, but you carry the markings of a prisoner. Tell me the truth." Genevieve tightened her grip on the chemise. She looked at the door, calculating an escape, then back at him. She realized there was no way out. She took a deep, shuddering breath and stood up straighter. The trembling stopped. When she spoke, her voice was completely different. It was deeper, colder, and devoid of the melodic lilt she used at dinner parties. "You want the truth, Your Grace?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "The truth is not something you can buy with a title, and it is certainly not something you can handle." "Try me," Sebastian challenged. Genevieve let out a bitter, dry laugh. "You think you saved me when you married me? You think you rescued the Iron Heiress? You foolish man. You didn't buy a wife. You bought a cover story." Sebastian stared at her, his mind racing to catch up with the sudden shift in reality. The woman standing before him was not Genevieve, the Duchess of Stirling. This was someone else entirely. "A cover story?" Sebastian repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Explain. Now." Genevieve walked over to her vanity table. She didn't bother to pull the chemise back up over her scarred shoulders. She sat down and picked up a heavy silver hairbrush, turning it over in her hands as if weighing it as a weapon. "Do you know where my father, Lord Harrington, made his first fortune?" she asked. "Iron mines. In the north," Sebastian answered. "That is the official story, the polite story," she said. "Before the mines, Silas Harrington ran the docks in East London. He didn't trade in iron then. He traded in favors, gambling debts, protection rackets, and information." Sebastian felt a chill. The East London docks were a cesspool of crime, controlled by syndicates that even the Crown couldn't fully root out. "He bought his title," Genevieve continued, staring into the mirror at Sebastian's reflection. "He scrubbed his name clean with money. He wanted to enter high society. He needed a daughter who looked the part, a perfect, pristine lady to marry a duke and cement his legitimacy. So he trained you," Sebastian realized. "The etiquette lessons, the French, the piano." "Oh yes, I was drilled for 12 hours a day from the age of 10, she said. But silence was the most important lesson. Silas has enemies, rivals from his old life, men who felt he owed them. She turned on the stool to face him, the firelight catching the jagged scar on her shoulder. When I was 16, a rival gang, the O'Malley brothers, kidnapped me. They held me in a cellar on Bleak Street for 3 weeks. They wanted Silas to give up his shipping routes. Sebastian felt bile rise in his throat. The scars. They thought if they hurt me enough, he would break, she said matter-of-factly. They used a horsewhip. They burned me with cigar tips. They wanted me to scream loud enough for him to hear it in his nightmares. Sebastian fell to his knees beside her stool. He couldn't help himself. He reached out a hand toward her back but stopped inches away, afraid to touch her. God, Genevieve. Did he pay them? Genevieve looked at him with a pitying expression. No. Silas Harrington doesn't negotiate. He sent mercenaries. They killed everyone in that house. When they dragged me out, my father didn't hug me. He didn't cry. He looked at my back and said, "This will ruin your market value. Cover it up." Sebastian closed his eyes. He had called her shallow. He had mocked her for caring about dresses. He hadn't realized that the dresses were armor, high necklines, long sleeves, heavy fabrics. They were the only things hiding her trauma from a society that would shun damaged goods. "So you married me," Sebastian whispered, "to escape him." "I married you because Silas told me to," she corrected him. "And because you were a duke with a failing estate. You were desperate. You wouldn't ask too many questions as long as the checks cleared. It was a safe harbor." "Safe?" Sebastian laughed bitterly. "I have treated you like furniture." "Indifference is safe, Sebastian," she said softly. "I prefer your coldness to my father's attention. At least you don't hit me." The bar was so low it was buried underground. Sebastian felt a wave of shame so potent it nearly knocked him over. He looked at the bruises on her lower back, the fresh ones. "And these?" He pointed gently. "You said the kidnapping was years ago. These are new." Genevieve flinched. She stood up abruptly, pulling the chemise up and clutching it tight. "Those are accidents. I fell riding last week." "You are a liar, Genevieve," Sebastian said, standing up to tower over her. "You are an accomplished liar. I give you that. But I am a soldier. I know the difference between a bruise from a fall and a bruise from a grip. Someone grabbed you. Recently." She stayed silent, biting her lip. "Is it Silas?" Sebastian demanded. "Is he hurting you still?" "No," she cried out, too quickly. "He lives in the north. I haven't seen him since the wedding." "Then who?" "Drop it, Sebastian. Please." "I will not drop it. I found a withdrawal. £5,000 sent to a sanitarium in the Alps. Who is there? Who are you paying?" Genevieve's face went white again. This secret was evidently more dangerous than the scars. "If you pursue this," she whispered, "you will die. They will kill you, Sebastian. Just go back to your separate room. Go back to hating me. It's better that way." Sebastian stepped forward and took her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. Her skin was cold. "I don't hate you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I never hated you. I just didn't know you. But I am knowing you now. And I am tell you this, Genevieve. I am the Duke of Stirling. This is my house. You are my wife. No one hurts what is mine." He looked deep into her eyes. "Who are you protecting?" Genevieve searched his face. She saw the stubbornness there, the same determination that had held the line at Varna. She realized he wasn't going to stop. She let out a long, defeated sigh. "My sister," she whispered. Sebastian blinked. "You are an only child. That is the official story," she repeated. "Beatrix. She didn't turn out like me." She fought back. When Silas tried to train her, she bit him. She ran away. He had her committed. He put her in an asylum when she was 14 to keep her quiet. He told everyone she died of fever. Tears finally spilled over Genevieve's lashes. "I found her 2 years ago. I hired a private investigator. She was in a hellhole in Yorkshire. I bribed the guards to move her to the clinic in Switzerland. It costs a fortune to keep her hidden and safe from Silas. That is where the money goes." Sebastian felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The obsession with money, the cold demeanor. She was carrying the weight of 2 lives on her scarred back. "But the bruises," Sebastian pressed. "If she is in Switzerland, who grabbed you here?" Genevieve looked at the window, where the rain lashed against the glass. "Silas found out," she said, her voice trembling. "He sent a man, a collector. He came to the gardens 3 days ago. He told me if I don't stop paying for Beatrix, if I don't let her rot, He will release the information about my past. He will tell the newspapers that the Duchess of Stirling is a soiled woman from the slums. He will ruin your name, Sebastian. He will destroy your family's legacy. She looked up at him, pleading. I can't let him ruin you. I was going to stop the payments. I was going to let Beatrix go. Sebastian stared at her. She was willing to sacrifice her sister to save his reputation, to save the pride of a husband who barely spoke to her. A fire ignited in Sebastian's chest. It wasn't the cold duty of a duke. It was the white-hot rage of a husband. You will do no such thing, Sebastian said firmly. He walked to the bell pull and yanked it violently. What are you doing? Genevieve gasped. I am summoning my valet to pack my trunk, Sebastian said. And yours. Where are we going? Sebastian turned to her, a dark, dangerous smile playing on his lips. We are going to the Alps to get your sister. And then? He paused, his eyes hardening into flint. Then, my dear wife, I am going to introduce your father to the 4th Dragoons. The carriage rattled violently over the cobblestones of the French countryside, the wheels groaning under the speed. Inside, the air was thick with tension and the smell of damp wool. They had left London under the cover of a dense fog, boarding a private packet boat to Calais before Silas Harrington's spies could alert him to their departure. Now, 3 days into their journey toward the Swiss border, the exhaustion was setting in. Sebastian watched Genevieve across the carriage. She was asleep, her head resting against the velvet squabs. The moonlight filtered through the window, illuminating the dark circles under her eyes. She looked fragile, but Sebastian knew better now. He knew that beneath the silk bodice was a map of survival. He shifted his leg, wincing. His old war wound was acting up in the damp cold. Genevieve's eyes fluttered open instantly. She didn't wake up slowly like a pampered aristocrat. She snapped awake, her hand instinctively going to the small reticule bag on her lap. We are safe, Sebastian said softly. Just a pothole. Genevieve relaxed, though her hand stayed on the bag. We are miles from safe, Sebastian. Silas has reach. You don't understand how deep his pockets go. I have faced French cavalry charges, Sebastian said, pouring a small cup of water from a flask. I can handle an angry iron merchant. He isn't a merchant. He is a monster, she replied, taking the water. Her fingers brushed his, and a spark of electricity jumped between them. For the first time in 3 years, the touch didn't feel obligatory. It felt desperate. Genevieve, Sebastian started, his voice rough. When this is over, when your sister is safe, things will be different. At Stirling Hall. She looked away. You say that now, but when the adrenaline fades, you will remember that your wife is the daughter of a criminal. You will look at me and see him. I look at you and see the bravest woman I have ever met, he said firmly. Before she could respond, the carriage lurched violently to the left. The horses screamed, a terrifying, high-pitched sound that cut through the night. The carriage slammed onto its side, throwing Sebastian and Genevieve into a tangle of limbs and wood. Glass shattered. The world spun. Sebastian groaned, shaking his head to clear the ringing in his ears. Genevieve? I'm here, she gasped from beneath him. I'm all right. The carriage door above them was wrenched open. A face peered down, a man with a jagged nose and a bowler hat. It was the man from the garden, the collector. Lord Harrington sends his regards, the man sneered. He raised a heavy flintlock pistol. Sebastian didn't think. He reacted with the muscle memory of a soldier. He grabbed the shattered remains of the carriage window frame and drove the jagged wood upward into the man's wrist. The pistol discharged, the ball burying itself in the upholstery inches from Genevieve's head. The man screamed and dropped the gun. Stay down, Sebastian roared at Genevieve. He pulled himself up through the open door, emerging into the biting wind. The carriage had been run off the road by a fallen tree trunk, a deliberate trap. 3 men stood in the snow, holding lanterns and cudgels. The collector was clutching his bleeding wrist, his face twisted in fury. Kill him, the collector shouted. Keep the girl alive, but gut the Duke. Sebastian drew the sword cane. He always carried a deceptively thin blade hidden within his walking stick. He assumed a defensive stance, the cold air filling his lungs. It had been years since Varna, but the dance of death was like riding a bicycle. The first thug lunged. Sebastian sidestepped, parrying the clumsy cudgel swing and riposting with a slash to the man's thigh. The man went down howling, but there were too many. The second man tackled Sebastian from behind, pinning his arms. The collector stepped forward, drawing a long, serrated knife with his good hand. Pretty hero, the collector spat. Let's see how you look without a nose. Sebastian struggled, but the man holding him was immense. He saw the knife glint in the moonlight. He braced himself for the pain. Bang! A deafening crack tore through the clearing. The collector's eyes went wide. A small red flower bloomed on his chest. He looked down at it, confused, before crumbling into the snow. The man holding Sebastian froze, his grip loosening in shock. Sebastian used the moment to drive his elbow back into the man's solar plexus, then spun around and knocked him unconscious with the hilt of his sword. Sebastian stood panting in the snow, looking around for the source of the shot. Genevieve was standing on the side of the overturned carriage. Her hair was wild, whipping in the wind. Her dress was torn. In her hand, trembling violently, was a small, pearl-handled Derringer pistol, the one she had been guarding in her reticule. She had shot the collector through the heart from 20 paces. Sebastian stared at her. It was an impossible shot for a novice. He walked over to the carriage and reached up, lifting her down. Her knees buckled the moment her feet hit the ground, and she collapsed against his chest, dropping the gun. I practiced, she sobbed into his coat. In the cellars. After I escaped, I swore I would never be helpless again. Sebastian wrapped his arms around her, crushing her to him. He could feel her heart hammering against his ribs, matching the frantic rhythm of his own. You are not helpless, he whispered into her hair, kissing the top of her head. You are a warrior, Genevieve, and you just saved my life. He looked at the bodies in the snow. The threat was gone for the moment, but the message was clear. Silas Harrington wasn't just threatening exposure anymore. He was sending executioners. We cannot take the carriage, Sebastian said, his voice grim. The axle is broken. We have to walk to the next village. It's 5 miles. I can walk, Genevieve said, pulling back and wiping her tears. She looked at the dead man, then at Sebastian. Her eyes were hard, the sapphire ice returning, but this time it wasn't to shut him out. It was to lock her resolve in. I walked out of Bleak Street on a broken ankle. I can walk to Switzerland if I have to. Sebastian took off his heavy greatcoat and draped it over her shoulders. Then let us walk, Your Grace. The sanatorium of St. Jude was not a hospital. It was a fortress of solitude perched on a jagged cliff overlooking the valley of Lauterbrunnen. The air here was thin and sharp, smelling of pine and ozone. It had taken them 4 days to reach it from the site of the ambush. They had travelled by farm cart, by train, and finally by a mule-drawn sleigh up the treacherous mountain pass. Sebastian and Genevieve stood at the heavy iron gates. The wind howled around them, kicking up plumes of powder snow. Sebastian rang the bell. A peephole slid open. A pair of suspicious eyes peered out. We are here to see Beatrix Harrington, Sebastian announced, his voice booming over the wind. I am the Duke of Stirling. This is her sister. No visitors. Doctor's orders, the voice croaked. Open this gate, Sebastian said, stepping closer, or I will purchase this entire mountain and have you evicted by sunset. The peephole slid shut. A moment later, the heavy bolts groaned, and the gates swung open. They were led through a sterile, echoing courtyard to the office of Dr. Adler. The doctor was a thin, bird-like man with spectacles so thick they magnified his eyes into watery orbs. He looked nervous. Your Grace, Adler stammered, wringing his hands. This is highly irregular. Lord Harrington gave strict instructions. Lord Harrington is not here. Sebastian cut him off. He slammed a heavy pouch of gold sovereigns onto the desk. I am assuming control of Beatrix's care. Take us to her. Adler looked at the gold, then at the sword cane leaning against Sebastian's leg. He swallowed hard. She is in the East Wing, the high security ward. High security? Genevieve asked, her voice trembling. She isn't a criminal. She is. Difficult, Your Grace, Adler said. Violent outbursts. Paranoia. She claims people are watching her. Given her father, Sebastian muttered. That sounds like sanity to me. They followed Adler down a long white corridor that smelled of lie and misery. Screams echoed faintly from behind closed doors. Genevieve gripped Sebastian's arm so tightly, her knuckles turned white. They reached the last door on the left. Adler unlocked it with a heavy brass key. The room was small, bare, and freezing. There was a single barred window looking out over the abyss of the Alps. Sitting on the floor in the corner, wrapped in a grey wool blanket, was a figure. Beatrix? Genevieve whispered. The figure turned. Sebastian was shocked. He expected a younger version of Genevieve, but Beatrix looked nothing like his wife. Where Genevieve was golden and polished, Beatrix was dark and sharp. Her hair was black, matted and chopped short. Her face was gaunt, her eyes wild and feverish. She looked like a cornered animal. Jenny? Beatrix rasped. Her voice was unused, scratchy. Genevieve ran across the room and fell to her knees, embracing her sister. Beatrix didn't hug back immediately. She stiffened, sniffing Genevieve's hair, checking for danger. Then, slowly, she melted, burying her face in Genevieve's neck and letting out a guttural sob. "He's coming," Beatrix whispered. "He knows, Jenny. He knows I took it." Sebastian stepped into the room, closing the door on Dr. Adler, who was hovering in the hallway. "Took what, Beatrix?" Sebastian asked gently. Beatrix looked up at him, her eyes narrowing. "Who is the giant?" "This is my husband," Genevieve said, stroking her sister's hair. "Sebastian. He is safe. He saved me." Beatrix studied Sebastian with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. She seemed to be weighing his soul. Finally, she nodded. "Silas didn't lock me away just because I ran," Beatrix said, her voice dropping to a conspirator's whisper. "He locked me away because I stole his insurance." "Insurance?" Sebastian asked. "The Black Ledger," Beatrix said. Genevieve gasped. "I thought that was a myth. The book where he keeps the names of every judge, politician, and lord he has bribed? It's real," Beatrix grinned, a crooked, broken smile. "I found it in his study the night I ran. That's why he hunted me. That's why he didn't kill me. He thinks I hid it and forgot where. He's been paying Adler to drug me, to try and make me remember." "Where is it, Beatrix?" Sebastian asked urgently. "If we have that book, we can destroy him. We can send him to the gallows." Beatrix tapped her temple. "Safe. Very safe." "Is it here?" Genevieve asked. "No," Beatrix laughed. "I mailed it. The day I ran away. I mailed it to the one place Silas would never look, the one place he thinks is too pure for his filth." "Where?" Sebastian pressed. Beatrix looked at Genevieve. "I mailed it to you, Jenny. To your wedding present. The dollhouse." Genevieve blinked, confused. "The dollhouse? The antique one Silas gave me as a mockery?" "Yes," Beatrix said. "It has a false bottom in the kitchen. I hid it there before he shipped the gift to Sterling Hall." Sebastian felt a cold dread wash over him. "The dollhouse is in the nursery at Sterling Hall," Sebastian said. "We left the house unguarded." "No," Genevieve corrected him, her face paling. "We didn't leave it unguarded. We left it with him." "Who?" "My cousin," Genevieve said. "Arthur. Silas sent him to manage the estate while we were away. I didn't think anything of it because Arthur is an idiot." "Arthur works for Silas," Beatrix hissed. "If he finds that book..." Suddenly, the heavy iron bell at the main gate began to clang a frantic, rhythmic alarm. Dr. Adler burst into the room, his face grey with terror. "You must leave," he shouted. "Men, armed men at the gate." Sebastian ran to the window. Far below, winding up the snowy path, was a cavalcade of black carriages and men on horseback. Leading them, wrapped in a fur coat that made him look like a bear, was a man Sebastian recognized from the society pages. Lord Silas Harrington. "He's here," Sebastian said, turning back to the women. "He must have tracked us from the ambush." "He wants the book," Beatrix whimpered, curling into a ball. "He'll peel my skin off to get the location." "He isn't touching you," Sebastian growled. He looked around the small cell. There was no way out but the door, and the enemy was at the gates. He turned to Genevieve. "Does this place have a back exit?" "Only the supply lift," Dr. Adler squeaked. "It goes down the cliff face to the village below, but it's rickety. It can't take 3 people." Sebastian grabbed Genevieve's shoulders. "Listen to me. You and Beatrix take the lift, go to the village, get to the telegraph office. Wire the Home Secretary Lord Fairchild is an old friend of my father. Tell him everything." "What about you?" Genevieve asked, panic rising in her voice. "You're coming with us." "I have to hold them off," Sebastian said calmly. "If they see the lift moving, they'll shoot the cables. I need to buy you time." "No," Genevieve screamed, grabbing his lapels. "I am not leaving you. Not again. We are a team, remember?" "We are a team," Sebastian agreed, his eyes soft. "And the team needs someone to deliver the evidence. You are the only one who can find the book in the dollhouse. You are the mission, Genevieve." He kissed her, hard and desperate, a kiss of goodbye. Then he pulled away and shoved the sword cane into her hand. "Take care of your sister," he commanded. "Go." He pushed them toward Adler and the door. Genevieve looked back one last time, tears streaming down her face. She saw her husband, the Duke of Sterling, standing in the center of the asylum cell, rolling up his sleeves, preparing to fight a private army with his bare hands. Then she turned and ran. Sebastian walked into the hallway. He could hear the front gates splintering. He picked up a heavy iron bar from a broken bed frame. "Well then," Sebastian whispered to the empty corridor, "let's see if the Ice King can burn." The corridor of the sanatorium of St. Jude became a bottleneck of violence. Sebastian stood alone, blocking the path to the supply lift, gripping the heavy iron bed frame bar like a medieval mace. The first wave of Silas Harrington's mercenaries crashed through the heavy oak doors of the ward. They expected a terrified doctor or a weeping girl. They did not expect the Duke of Stirling in a berserker rage. Sebastian swung the iron bar with a roar that shook the dust from the ceiling rafters. The metal connected with the first attacker's shoulder, sending him flying back into his comrades. The hallway was narrow, neutralizing the mercenaries' numbers. They couldn't swarm him. They had to come at him two at a time. "Get past him," a voice bellowed from the rear. "I want my daughters." It was Silas. The sound of his voice fueled the fire in Sebastian's blood. For 10 minutes, Sebastian was not a man. He was a wall. He took a cudgel blow to the ribs that he knew cracked bone. A knife slashed his forearm. But he didn't fall. Every minute he bought was another 100 feet the supply lift could descend. Behind him, the faint grinding of gears told him the lift was moving. They were escaping. Finally, the mercenaries pulled back. The hallway fell silent, save for Sebastian's ragged breathing and the dripping of blood from his fingertips. Silas Harrington stepped into the light. He was a massive man, wearing a fur coat that made him look twice his size. His face was a roadmap of cruelty, with hard eyes that looked at Sebastian not with anger, but with calculation. "You fight well for a bankrupt aristocrat," Silas said, lighting a cigar. "But you are bleeding out, Your Grace." "I have bled before," Sebastian spat, leaning heavily on his iron bar. "You won't get them, Silas. They are gone." Silas walked to the window and looked down. He saw the empty cables swaying in the wind. The lift had reached the bottom. He sighed, annoyed, as if he had missed a train, not lost his children. He turned back to Sebastian. "You know where it is, don't you?" "The book." Sebastian managed a bloody smile. "I know where it is, and I know what is in it. Your empire is finished." Silas signaled to his men. 2 fresh thugs stepped forward, holding heavy chains. "My empire is built on leverage, boy," Silas said calmly. "And I just acquired a new piece of leverage. I don't need to chase the girls. If I have you, Genevieve will bring the book to me." Sebastian tried to raise the bar again, but his vision swam. The blood loss caught up to him. His knees buckled. He fell forward, the stone floor rushing up to meet him. The last thing he heard was Silas's voice, cold and satisfied. "Keep him alive." "Barely. We are going to Stirling Hall." Meanwhile, at the base of the cliff, the supply lift crashed into the frozen mud. Genevieve scrambled out, pulling a shivering Beatrix with her. They were in the valley floor, shrouded in mist. "He didn't come," Beatrix whimpered, looking up at the disappearing cables. "The giant didn't come." Genevieve looked up at the asylum, perched like a vulture's nest on the peak. She felt a phantom pain in her chest, as if her own heart had been left up there with him. But she forced the feeling down. Sebastian had ordered her to complete the mission. If she broke down now, his sacrifice meant nothing. "He will be fine," Genevieve lied, her voice steel. "He is the toughest man in England. But we have work to do." She grabbed her sister's hand. "We need to get to London. We need to get to the dollhouse." "How?" Beatrix asked. "We have no money, no carriage." Genevieve looked at her wedding ring, the massive sapphire surrounded by diamonds that had been in the Caldwell family for generations. It was worth more than this entire Swiss village. She pulled it off her finger. "We are going to buy a train," Genevieve said. "A very fast one." Stirling Hall stood imposing and grey against the rainy London sky. To the casual observer, it looked peaceful. But to Genevieve, who lay hidden in the shrubbery of the perimeter garden with Beatrix, it looked like a fortress. It had been 3 days since Switzerland. They had travelled non-stop, bribing conductors and stealing horses when necessary. They were exhausted, filthy, and desperate. "Arthur is inside," Genevieve whispered. "I saw him walk past the library window." "Cousin Arthur is a weasel," Beatrix hissed. "Yes, but he is a weasel with a shotgun," Genevieve noted. "We cannot use the front door. We have to use the coal chute." They circled the house, slipping into the cellar through the coal delivery hatch. They crawled over piles of anthracite, their faces blackened with dust, looking more like chimney sweeps than duchesses. They crept up the servants' stairs, the house silent around them. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot. They reached the nursery on the 3rd floor. It was a room frozen in time, filled with toys for children the Duke and Duchess never had. In the center of the room stood the dollhouse. It was a magnificent, grotesque thing, a perfect replica of Harrington Manor, the house where they had been tortured. Silas had given it to Genevieve as a wedding gift, a cruel reminder that she could never truly leave home. Beatrix rushed to it. She opened the miniature kitchen door. Her fingers fumbled with the tiny checkered floorboards. "Come on," she muttered. "Come on." Click. A hidden compartment popped open. Inside lay a small, black, leather-bound notebook. "Got it," Beatrix breathed, clutching it to her chest. "Excellent," a voice drawled from the doorway. "Uncle Silas will be so pleased." Genevieve spun around. Arthur was leaning against the doorframe, a double-barreled shotgun leveled at them. He looked smug, his cravat perfectly tied. "Arthur," Genevieve said, stepping in front of Beatrix. "Get out of my way." "Or what?" Arthur laughed. "You'll hit me with a fan? You're a decoration, Genevieve. A pretty, expensive." Genevieve didn't wait for him to finish. She grabbed a heavy porcelain doll from the shelf next to her, a terrifying thing with glass eyes, and hurled it with the accuracy of a cricket bowler. The doll smashed into Arthur's face, shattering on impact. Arthur screamed, dropping the gun as he clutched his bleeding nose. Genevieve didn't hesitate. She kicked the shotgun across the room, then lunged at Arthur, driving her knee into his groin. He crumbled to the floor, wheezing. "I am not a decoration," she whispered into his ear. "I am a Harrington, and I am a Caldwell. You have no idea what that combination is capable of." She grabbed the shotgun and checked the breech. Loaded. "Tie him up," she ordered Beatrix. "Use the curtain cords." Beatrix grinned maniacally and went to work. Just as they finished securing Arthur, the sound of heavy carriage wheels crunched on the gravel driveway below. Doors slammed. Genevieve went to the window. Her blood ran cold. Silas Harrington was stepping out of a black carriage. Behind him, two men were dragging a prisoner. It was Sebastian. He was barely recognizable. His face was swollen, one eye shut. He was limping heavily, his shirt torn and stained with dried blood. But he was alive. Silas looked up at the nursery window, as if he knew exactly where they were. He cupped his hands around his mouth. "Genevieve," he shouted, "I have something that belongs to you. I propose a trade. The book, for the Duke." Genevieve looked at the black notebook in Beatrix's hand, the evidence that could free them, the evidence that could save thousands of people from her father's corruption. Then she looked down at her husband, the man who had walked into hell for her, the man who had looked at her scars and called her a warrior. "Give me the book, Beatrix," Genevieve said softly. "He'll destroy it," Beatrix warned, "and then he'll kill us all anyway." "No," Genevieve said, taking the book. She tucked it into the bodice of her dress. She checked the shotgun again. He won't. The grand foyer of Sterling Hall was a cavernous space of marble and shadows. Silas Harrington stood in the center, flanked by 4 armed guards. Sebastian was on his knees before him, a knife held to his throat by one of the mercenaries. At the top of the grand staircase, Genevieve appeared. She had washed the coal from her face, but she hadn't changed her torn dress. She held the shotgun in one hand, resting it casually on her shoulder. Beatrix stood behind her, a shadow in the gloom. "The prodigal daughter returns," Silas sneered. "Drop the gun, girl, or I open his throat." Genevieve walked down the stairs, one slow step at a time. "Let him go, father. Then you get the book." "Book first," Silas demanded. Genevieve stopped halfway down the stairs. She reached into her dress and pulled out the black notebook. She held it up for him to see. "It's all here, isn't it?" she called out. "The bribes to the Port Authority, the judges on your payroll, the murder of the union leader in York. Give it to me," Silas roared, losing his patience. "You want it?" Genevieve asked. "Catch." She threw the book, not at Silas, but high into the air, over the heads of the men, toward the roaring fireplace in the great hearth to her right. "No!" Silas screamed. He and his guards instinctively lunged toward the fireplace to catch the precious ledger before it hit the flames. Even the man holding the knife to Sebastian turned his head for a split second, distracted by the arc of the book. That second was all Sebastian needed. Despite his injuries, Sebastian exploded upwards. He drove his head back into the mercenary's face, shattering the man's nose. As the man staggered back, Sebastian grabbed the knife from his hand. Silas caught the book just before it hit the fire. He let out a laugh of triumph, clutching it to his chest. "I have it. You stupid girl. I have it." "You have a book," Genevieve said calmly, leveling the shotgun at her father. Silas looked down. He opened the black leather cover. It wasn't the ledger. It was a book of poetry, sonnets from the Portuguese. He looked up, confusion twisting his face. "What is this?" "I switched it," Genevieve said. Beatrix has the real ledger. She slipped out the back while you were watching me descend the stairs. She is on her way to Scotland Yard with the Home Secretary, Lord Fairchild. We telegraphed him from Dover. Silas's face turned purple. Kill them! Kill them all! He pulled a pistol from his coat. Genevieve pulled the trigger of the shotgun. Boom! The shot didn't hit Silas. She aimed for the chandelier above his head. The massive crystal fixture, weighing half a ton, sheared off its chain. Silas looked up just in time to scream. The chandelier crashed down, burying Silas and 2 of his guards under a mountain of shattered crystal and brass. The remaining 2 guards looked at the wreckage, then at Sebastian, who was holding a bloody knife, and finally at Genevieve, who was reloading the shotgun with practiced ease. They dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Silence fell over Stirling Hall. Sebastian limped over to the pile of debris. Silas was pinned, unconscious but alive, trapped in the cage of his own ambition. Sebastian turned to Genevieve. She threw the gun aside and ran to him. They collided in the middle of the room, holding each other with a desperation that defied words. Sebastian winced as she hugged his bruised ribs, but he didn't let go. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of coal dust and rain. "You switched the book," he rasped, laughing painfully. "You brilliant, dangerous woman." "I told you," she whispered, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. "I'm not a porcelain doll, Sebastian. I'm your wife." 6 months later, the winter snow had melted from the grounds of Stirling Hall, replaced by the vibrant green of spring. The estate was no longer quiet. It was bustling. The iron mines, now legally under the control of the Crown, following Silas Harrington's life imprisonment, were paying out dividends to the workers, and a percentage was funneled back to the Stirling estate thanks to Genevieve's negotiation skills. In the garden, Beatrix sat on a blanket, sketching the flowers. She was still healing, still jumpy at loud noises, but she smiled now. Dr. Adler was in prison, and she was free. On the terrace, Sebastian sat reading a newspaper. His limp was almost gone, though a scar ran through his eyebrow, giving him a roguish air. Genevieve stepped out through the French doors. She was wearing a dress of deep emerald green, no high collar, no long sleeves. The back was cut low, exposing her shoulders to the sun. She didn't hide the scars anymore. She wore them like medals. She walked over to Sebastian and took the newspaper from his hands. "The gossip columns are boring today," she said, sitting on his lap without hesitation. "Are they?" Sebastian smiled, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Nothing about the scandalous Duke and his warrior bride?" "Old news," she murmured, leaning in to kiss him. "They are calling us something else now." "Oh? And what is that?" "The Unbreakables." Sebastian looked at her, really looked at her. The ice was gone. The distance was gone. In its place was a fire that would burn for a lifetime. "I like it," he said. He kissed her, and for the first time in the history of the Caldwell line, the Duke of Stirling was truly, completely warm. And that is the incredible story of Sebastian and Genevieve. What started as a cold, transactional marriage, frozen by secrets, turned into a bond, forged in fire and blood. It goes to show that you never truly know the battles someone is fighting beneath the surface, or the strength they hide behind a mask of perfection. Sebastian thought he wanted a perfect duchess, but he needed a partner who could fight beside him. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, action, and romance, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with a friend who loves a good historical drama, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. I have a mystery thriller coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching.